All right. Well, if you guys did not know, we have finally finished our relationship series. So, everyone, especially all of my sixth graders, go ahead, give me a big sigh of relief. We're done with it, right? Yes. We are finished. I know for me, I enjoyed our time looking at how God created it and what that means for us because it will be very applicable for our lives, even if it's not for you right now. So I always enjoy when we do that. But now we're switching gears into something new. We're diving into the book of Proverbs. And so the book of Proverbs is a book all about practical wisdom things. It is a book of instruction, which is why we decided to call this series Stuff You Should Know. And so we just believe that there's some things you should know. That's why I had Jeffrey and Corley teach you something you should know, how to change a tire. How many of you guys were out there while Jeffrey and Corley were changing the tire earlier? How many of you were paying attention? Yeah. No. Yeah. Everyone give it up for Jeffrey and Corley for taking the time to do that. Listen, just like with relationships, you might be looking at them changing the tire and being like, this is dumb. I don't know why y'all are spending my time doing this. This isn't important for me. And that will be true until a day where you're on the road and you have a flat tire. And then it becomes very, very real for you in that moment. And so here's the thing, the whole thing with this series, what we're doing, why we even spent the time to teach you how to change a tire. You don't want to wait for the wisdom to do something till you find yourself in the situation without it, right? You don't want to wait till you find yourself in the situation and in that moment realize that you are lacking knowledge in something, lacking wisdom in something, lacking the ability to navigate whatever situation you find yourself in, whether it is changing a tire, whether it is navigating conflict, whether it's making a moral decision, whether something is right or wrong. You don't want to wait till you find yourself in those moments to know what you should do, how we should respond, what you should know about it. And the book of Proverbs is a great place for us to begin to start that journey of what things should we know. And so we're going to spend a little bit of our time today looking at the book of Proverbs and kind of giving us an overview. I want you to think of today as overview. I want to help you understand how we would begin to read the book of Proverbs and some of the things we should know, and we'll dive into a very little bit of it. And then over the next couple of weeks, we're going to dive into some specific areas that God is going to give us wisdom about in the Proverbs. And so, like I said, this is for our benefit. This is wisdom. This is practical advice. So I want you guys to lean in our time together. It's a book of instruction. So much like if you were outside when Jeffrey was trying to teach you how to change a tire. Who remembers the first thing that you're supposed to do when you change a tire? Does anyone know? Take the stuff out of the trunk. Is that true, Jeffrey? Did you tell them to put the thing under the car and bring it up? That you do not want to do that first. So that's false. Keith, get to work. Put the car, stop the car, right? Put the brake. All right, there's something, so someone mentioned jacking the car up. There is something crucial you have to do before you jack the car up. Does anyone know what it is? Huh? We already said turn the car off. You want to loosen the lug nuts before you start jacking the car up. Because if your lug nuts are all the way tight and you get the car up in the air and you begin trying to get it, you won't be able to. And so you take your lug nuts off and then you take your tire off, and now what do? The car's already lifted. Keep up with us, man. Keep up. You're like 3 steps behind. You obviously weren't out there. Are you supposed to lift the car higher? Are you lifting the other side of the car? No. And so we put the new tire on, and then we tighten the lug nuts partially. We let it down, tighten it all the way, and hopefully, if you've done it rightly, you have a car that you can now drive. Did I miss anything, Jeffrey? After you drive 5 miles, what happens? Okay, yeah, that's great. You want to double check your tightness, because you don't want your tire to fall off. That's not a good idea. So there is instruction. The whole purpose of us doing that, we're going to be doing something fun every week, teaching you something you should do, just like we did this week. But the reason is because for us to learn something that we don't know about, we have to receive instruction, right? And so that's why we had you guys go out there and receive instruction from Jeffrey about something you might not have known about, and that when you find yourself in that situation, you really want to know a lot about. And so just like that in life, you're going to find yourself in situations that you will wish you knew more about so that you can navigate it properly, so that you can know how to make the right decision, so that you can know what to do. And this is a book of instruction. It's going to teach us not only about instruction, about knowledge, but how we're supposed to respond to it. So a couple of things about the book of Proverbs before we jump in. Who wrote it? Solomon, yes. So King Solomon, if you know who Solomon is, if you've ever heard of King David, raise your hand if you've heard of King David. Okay, a lot of people heard of King David. Who knows what David did? Okay, a lot of mixed reviews in the crowd. He killed Goliath, right? He was the man after God's own heart. He was the king. He also made a lot of mistakes too. He wasn't a perfect person. And one of his sons, King Solomon, went to God and asked God, somehow worked this thing out. I don't know. I didn't get this deal, but he got to ask God for something, and he asked God for wisdom. And we find in 1 Kings that God is going to give it to him. So 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 29, it says, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore, so that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people to the east and all of the wisdom of Egypt." So he says Solomon came to him and asked him for wisdom, and God actually gave it to him. He said that his understanding was beyond measure. The picture it is trying to create is there's not an IQ test that has been created that could give you an accurate picture of how smart he was. Like there's not a library big enough that could contain all of the information that he was able to understand. It says the breadth of his mind was like the sand on the seashore. Like maybe some of you are like multitaskers. You're like, I like doing multiple things at the same time. He could do so many things at the same time and operate on all of them at 100%, right? He was able to do more. God gave him this really supernatural ability to be wise, to operate in wisdom. And what Solomon did with that is he began to navigate life. He began to walk around, and as he's walking around and experiencing the world around him, he is processing it, he is understanding it, and he begins to give instruction on what we're supposed to do with it. We see in the next verse, in verse 31, so this is 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 31. He says, "For he was wiser than all the other men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Herman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. And his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds and of reptiles and of fish. And people of all the nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom." And so what we see is Solomon gets this supernatural wisdom from God, and he begins walking around, observing and understanding how the world works around him and giving him instruction. It mentions specific things like he's seeing trees and he's saying, hey, this is how trees work under these conditions. Sap begins to get produced by trees. This is how trees grow. He's looking at reptiles and realizing that this certain reptile is different than that reptile, and this is how they interact, and this is what they do. And he's looking at fish and saying, hey, fish breathe differently than us. How can they breathe underwater? And God has given them this supernatural ability to understand the world around him. And it doesn't just stop at nature and at animals. He gave him a supernatural understanding of people. We see that in one of the books that we read in our last series, the Song of Solomon. Our first week, we looked at Solomon's understanding of how God wired people to be relational. And so he had this supernatural understanding, and thousands of years ago, he was able to put words to paper and speak it over people, things that are still true to this day, that we would say, yeah, that's exactly how that works. Yes, that is exactly right. And so that's why we believe it's beneficial. He knows more. So some of you are like, I come here and listen to Jeremy because Jeremy knows more than I do. Well, he knows more than all of us. So if we listen to anything that he says, we're going to be in a really, really good place. And so we're going to dive into the book of Proverbs. And so like I said, today is going to be a little bit of an overview for us. I'm going to give us some tools to help us understand it. Because here's the thing. Some of it can get confusing. It has different characters at times. It's using words you might not understand. So I want to give you some tools to how to understand it. And then we're going to look at a couple of verses that I believe will give us the big picture of what God is doing and what he wants for us. So the first big background information is that Proverbs is broken up into evaluative categories. So I always tell you this, that the Bible is full of evaluative categories and evaluative statements. It's saying, hey, this is right and this is wrong. And your response is to evaluate. It says, hey, this is good, this is bad. Your response is to evaluate. They say, hey, this is light, this is dark. Your response is to evaluate. And the way Proverbs was written, it was written with 4 primary characters. And you are supposed to see these characters throughout Proverbs and evaluate, where do I fall in? Who am I in this story? And so I'm going to give them to you if you're taking notes. The first one is the wise. The wise is a person who listens to God's instruction and follows it. And so as we look through Proverbs, it's very often going to mention the wise. And the wise is a person who listens to God's instruction and follow it. Our next character is the fool. The fool is someone who is opposed to God's instruction and trusts in his own ways. The fool is opposed to God's instruction and trusts in his own way. Our third character is the simple. The simple is not committed to wisdom or to foolishness, but is easily misled. So the simple is not committed to wisdom or to foolishness, but is easily misled. They don't want to make a decision right or wrong. They're just going to kind of stand in the middle, and they're easily influenced. They're easily swayed. And then the last character that is mentioned in the book of Proverbs is the scoffer. And the scoffer is someone who is proud and arrogant, and they ridicule, they make fun of the ways of God and those that follow it. And so we have the wise, the fool, the simple, and the scoffer. And I think we hit most of them, if not all of them today, but as we come back every week, you're going to see those characters come back. Hey, in this situation, this is what the wise person does. In this situation, this is what the foolish person does. In this situation, this is what the simple person does. And your evaluative response is to say, hey, I need to be honest with myself, and what is my natural response? What do I observe myself doing? Where do I fit in so I can know who I am in this story? The next thing you need to know is that the literature, how many of you enjoy literature, enjoy your English class, things like that? Not a lot of you guys. All right, well, you guys are going to love this next part. So the book of Proverbs in the Bible uses a lot of literary tools, and specifically in the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, it uses personification. Anyone know what that is? Yeah. Someone give me a good literature class definition. Okay, great. So it's living characteristics applied to non-living things. And so we're in the age right now of children books. Wit is 1 year old. Listen, personification was invented for children books because Wit loves a car that can talk, right? Like there's just something special about that. A non-living object that's doing living things, right? Like the car shouldn't get his feelings hurt and run away crying, yet it's happening in the children's book. And so it's meant to tell a story. It's meant to draw you in to relate something. Another thing, in movies you see a lot, the movie Cars, right? The animated movies that are taking these kind of non-living objects, but basing people around them and characteristics and things like that for you to see yourself in different avenues. And so that is the purpose of it in this. And so in this, there's two personifications of wisdom. Or there's two personifications. One is of wisdom as a woman. And so there's going to be parts where the tone changes, and it's not going to be describing groups of people, but it's going to start describing wisdom as a woman. And when it does that, the design is for how it's meant for you to relate to it differently. Like wisdom in this is describing itself. It's describing itself in action, doing things. But then also folly or foolishness is described as a woman. So there's these personifications. There will be these points, and we'll even, I think, read one of them today, where you see wisdom described as a woman. It's going to say, and she embraces the wise. And how she does, it's almost like this maternal response. And so when it does that, it's talking about how we interact. Because wisdom, we don't think of wisdom as a living thing, right? We wouldn't normally be like, hey, this is my buddy wisdom that I'm just hanging out and walking with. Yet Proverbs is going to tell us that we have an interaction with it. We have a way that we want to work with it. So giving you a couple of tools to work with so that we can do that. And so the last thing I have is the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and we're going to dive right into the book of Proverbs. And so we have knowledge and we have wisdom. I'm going to define them for you and talk about why it's different for what we're doing today. Knowledge is the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. Knowledge is the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. And when we talk about wisdom, wisdom is the ability to discern or judge what is true, right, and lasting. Wisdom is the ability to discern or judge what is true, right, and lasting. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that when we talk about knowledge or information, that's not always the same thing as wisdom. You can have the right information, but not operate in the right type of wisdom. Those are two different things. For example, how many people here have been hunting before? Anyone been hunting before? Okay, so some of you guys. So when you're hunting, you're given instruction on how to hold a gun, on how to fire again, on when to fire. So all these things, you're given instruction. There's a theoretical and practical knowledge of it. But wisdom is different. Wisdom is being able to make the decision on what's right in the right moment, what's wrong in the wrong moment. You're able to discern and judge what is right and true and wrong. You're able to discern and judge. If you see, here's the best way I could describe it. Knowledge is knowing what is right and wrong. Wisdom is operating in what is right and wrong. Knowledge is knowing what is right and wrong. Wisdom is your ability to operate in what is right and wrong. And so we're going to dive right in. And like I said, this is beneficial for us not only now, but for later. Because you're going to encounter situations. You're going to encounter difficulties. You're going to encounter conflict and questions and decisions in your life that you don't want to wait till you're in that moment to have a foundational knowledge of how to be wise in that situation. And so the book of Proverbs is going to open up in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1. And Solomon is going to introduce himself to us, and he is going to begin giving us kind of a purpose statement. Hey, here's my why. Here's what's going on here. So it says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealings and in righteousness, justice and equity, to give prudence to the simple, and knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the word of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction. So, I know that was throwing a lot at you. So I'm going to break it down just real briefly with some key highlights for you. Solomon is opening up his book, his instructions to you about life and how things works. And he says, hey, I want you to know wisdom. I want you to know and respond to wisdom and instruction, to be able to understand insight. And I think that word insight is so important for us to do it because a lot of times we just try to lump, like I said, it's so easy for us to lump knowledge and wisdom together. And he says, hey, I want you to know wisdom and instruction. We lump these things together. And he says, hey, I want you to know insight. It's so easy for us to lump it all together. But when he talks about insight, he's saying, hey, I want you to see things rightly. Here's the problem. So many times we can walk around, and as we're walking around and observing, we're going to make the wrong decisions because we're going to see things wrongly. We're not going to interpret things that are going around us in the right ways. And so he's saying, hey, you need to see things rightly. And really what he's saying is you need to see things truly. He's like, it is important for you to be able to look at something and know what is true and know what is right and know what is wrong, that you are seeing it rightly. And so, when we see something wrong in someone else, it's easy for us to call it out. We don't always see rightly when it comes to things for ourselves. We don't always have insight when it comes to ourselves. And so he says to receive instruction. He says, give prudence to the simple. So here's another one of our characters. The simple is someone who doesn't want to make a decision right or wrong. They're easily misled. They're easily swayed. They're over here one way. They're over here the other. And it says to give prudence. That means judgment and caution. He's saying, hey, I want to help those who are easily misled to be able to be cautious, to be able to make decisive judgments, to be able to choose rightly. He says the wise to increase in learning. And the fool, he says, the fool is someone who despises all of these things. They don't want to know what's wise. They don't want the instruction. They don't want someone telling them what to do, right? They don't want any of that. They want to be autonomous. They believe that they're the ones that are right. He says, let the wise increase in the learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. I think that's so important too. The word guidance is like direction. And so he says, hey, when the person who is wise, if you want to be wise, you're going to listen, and it's going to tell you where to go. It's going to give you guidance. It's going to give you direction. And that's going to be important for one of our verses where we're going later. But if we're not receiving the right type of instruction, we're not going to go the right direction. Like, has anyone ever been on a trip and you've got wrong directions before? Right? And you're just going, and you're like, something doesn't feel right, something doesn't look right, and you're like, just something feels wrong, and then you have to spend the extra work to turn around and go the right way. And he says, hey, you know what the wise does? The wise is able to observe and discern what the right direction is, and it's going to help them go that way. So here's a couple of things that we learn about the wisdom in Proverbs. So if you're taking notes, write this down. The wisdom in Proverbs is practical. He says it's instructions in wise dealing. The wisdom in Proverbs is moral. It gives us instruction on righteousness, on justice, on equity. It says the wisdom of Proverbs is for everyone. It's going to give wisdom to the wise, to the fool, to the simple, to the sky. It's going to give wisdom to all, available to all. But then it talks about, hey, where is our starting point? If this is something we should do, if this is something we want for ourselves, if we want the ability to make good decisions, if we want the ability to be wise in conflict, if we want the ability to be wise in friendships, if we want the ability to be wise with our finances, if we want the ability to be wise in whatever category of life you find yourself in, how do we get started? And so he says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord. And so that's a weird, I think, phrase for us in our context. We don't often think of things that way. And so he says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And it's more not afraid of God, but it's an awe and respect. And so when you has anyone ever been to like Niagara Falls before? Anyone ever seen it? Or at least have you seen something on TV like a giant waterfall or a giant mountain range or even like something like outer space or natural disasters, and you see these big giant things and there's this sense of awe and respect of like, hey, this is bigger than me. I don't have control over this. Like this is something outside of my power, outside. There's nothing I can do to influence this. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough money. I'm not strong enough. Nothing I can do can influence what's going on there. That is truly bigger. And it's this sense of awe and respect. And he says, hey, when it comes to us getting wisdom, it has to start with us understanding that God is the bigger one. God is the smarter one. That God is the one who is strong enough to do all of these things, and he's the one that created it. And if we start there, we're going to understand that he probably knows. It's not too big of a stretch to believe that he knows how it works best. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Solomon's going to continue in Proverbs chapter 4. He says, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. And this is where it switches. This is where wisdom takes on the personification of a woman. He says, prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life be many. And so a couple of things happening here. It kind of sounds redundant for a moment, so it gets kind of confusing for us where he says, hey, you want to know how to get wisdom? Go get it. And you're like, all right, so how do I get it? Well, you go get it. Okay, I hear you, but how do I go get it? Like, I get to get it, you got to get it, but how do I get it? You get it? And so it's a little bit confusing for us for a moment. And so here's what this is saying here. When it's using this same phrasing twice, it says the beginning of wisdom is to get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. It is talking about a conscious decision to pursue wisdom. It's saying, hey, you need to make a decision on what you're pursuing. You need to make a decision on what you're going after. Are you going to go after wisdom? And then it begins to talk about what happens when you go after wisdom. And wisdom is now personified as this woman. And it's almost this idea of like this relationship. Like you're pursuing this person in a relationship. You're pursuing this person that you care about. You're pursuing this person that you want close to you. And it says, prize her highly. It says, wisdom will respond to you. If you prize her, if you treat wisdom right, wisdom will exalt you. If you bring wisdom close, wisdom will be close to you. If you bestow on you a beautiful crown, and then the tone changes again, and you have this fatherly address here. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. It says, hear my son and accept my words, that the years of your life be many. And so now it tells us that there's a benefit. So not only should we be pursuing it, but now there's a benefit in it. It says that your years of life may be many. There's a really interesting type of video going around on social media called Dumb Ways to Die. Has anyone seen that? Yeah, some of you guys might know what I'm talking about. So it would take like a couple of video clips. You'd be like someone, riding a bike off of a cliff, and then it comes out like dumb ways to die. And then like another one, it would be like someone in a kitchen and they're not paying attention and they start like a kitchen fire. And then it's like dumb ways to die. And then we'll have something that like doesn't actually fit. Like it's not a real thing. And so it'll be like, this husband and her wife, and she's like, does this shirt make me look fat? And he's like, and then it's like, dumb ways to die, right? And so it's like taking all these different scenarios and doing it. And that's a little bit like what he's saying. There's a way that you can operate that's not dumb, and you actually live longer because of it. It's a very real reward, real and present reward. So he's saying, hey, this is real. This isn't just some made up, fictitious thing. Hey, this is practical and it's real for you. And so my first point for you is to know wisdom is not just to know the right information, but to operate in it. He says, hey, go get wisdom. And that starts with us making a decision to pursue it. And when we pursue wisdom, wisdom responds to us. And so to know wisdom is not just to know the right information, but to operate in it. Solomon's going to continue in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20. He says, my son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my saying. Let them not escape from your sight, and keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the spring of life. He says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the spring of life. So Solomon here, a lot of people say that this is one of the purpose statements behind the book of Proverbs, that as Solomon is collecting his writing, his saying, as people are putting this together and saying, hey, these are the important things, hey, these are the things that will benefit you the most. He says, hey, above all else, more important than all of these things, hey, keep your heart with all vigilance. That word keep also is the word protect. He's saying, hey, protect your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Here's the thing that it's saying, but it's not saying. So it's implied in the text. It's saying to keep your heart, to keep things away from your heart, to guard your heart. The implied statement there is that there is something that is coming after your heart that you need to protect yourself from. There is an implication there that there is something coming after you, that is coming after your heart, that does not want what's best for you, and it does not, in fact, lead to the springs of life. It's going to lead you elsewhere. And so he's saying, hey, my instruction for you, and like I said, it's this fatherly tone. He says, hey, my son, my child, hey, listen to me, incline your ear to me. Hey, I want you to keep my words in your heart, keep them close to you. Here's the most important thing I can share with you. Keep your heart protected. Guard your heart, because from it flows the springs of life. And so here's my question for you. What do you need to keep away from your heart? What do you need to keep away from your heart? There are influences and things and people and stuff all around you that does not want what is best for you and does not want what is best for your heart. And in fact, it is on the attack. You don't even have to go out and go look for it. And God is saying that we need to be on guard, that we need to be alert. It's this idea of alertness. And I don't think I understood this until I owned my own place and owned my own, when my parents were gone, right? I got married, I moved out, and I'm laying in my bed, and all of a sudden I hear a noise, right? Has anyone ever experienced that before? Parents and older people know, but even as kids, y'all have heard, you're like there has to be something outside of my door right now. I need to text my mom, come check my door. There's something out there. I'm really scared right now, right? But when you're an adult, you don't have a mom that you can text to come to your door. You're gonna have to go check your own door, right? You're gonna go have to hear what that creaky noise out in the hallway is all for yourself. And so it's this idea of being alert, this idea of being on guard, this idea of having the expectation that, hey, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, I'm not really sure what I'm hearing, but there's something out there and I need to be on guard, I need to be alert, I need to know that it's out there and it doesn't want what's best for me. And he says the best way for me to do that is to start by protecting, to start by guarding my heart from outside influences. And influence can be anything. It could be the music that you listen to that is telling you to do things that aren't wise. It's telling you to do foolish things. It's encouraging you to be simple or even to be a scoffer at the things of God. The music, the TV that you watch, the friends that you surround yourself with, the influences all around you every day. You have to begin to start evaluating, hey, where do they fall in line? Is this wise? Is this calling me to respond in wisdom to what God has called me to do? Is this influence calling me to be a fool? Is it calling me to look at the things of God and say my way is better than God's way? Is it causing me to be simple and say, hey, I'm not going to make a decision. I like being in the middle. I'm not against God, but I'm not for this thing. I'm just going to kind of sit here in the middle. Or maybe is it influencing you to be a scoffer, to say, hey, the things of God are dumb and the things of God, people are dumb, and what I'm doing is so much better. I don't want to deal with any of that. It's going to cause you to be an evaluator. And he says, if you want to protect yourself from that, he says the thing you have to start with is protecting your heart. He says, hey, you want to know what you need to keep in your heart? What's more important than what you need to keep out of your heart is what you need to keep inside of your heart. He says, keep my word in your heart. He says, when his word is in your heart, you're going to be very easy to identify what doesn't match up with it. And he says, when you do that, the springs of life flow from it. He says, you get to experience the best life possible. That the way that God created life to work, not only now here, but in eternity forever, is available to you, and you're able to walk in it in wisdom. But it starts with keeping our hearts. And so he's giving you the instruction. Not only today, and not only over the next 5 weeks, but all throughout his word, he's saying, hey, this is how you take off a lug nut. He says, hey, this is how you jack up a car. He says, hey, make sure you cut the car off before you start any of this, right? He is giving you instruction. Because maybe you don't think it's beneficial for you right now, but there's going to be a day down the road where you're going to want to operate in wisdom, and you don't want to have to wait till you find yourself in that situation to begin asking the question, what does wisdom look like here? So what do you need to be on guard from? Here's my last point before we close. We should know that what we let direct our hearts will also direct our lives. So what we let direct our hearts will also direct our lives. What direction are you going to go? The influence you allow in your heart is going to direct where you're going and where you're going to end up and what's going to happen there. So we have to be careful. We have to be alert. We have to be on guard. Are we evaluating our influences? Are we receiving the right kind of instruction? Are we seeing things rightly, or are we being foolish and simple and opposing the things of God, thinking that our own way is right? And listen, if I can ask you to just be selfish for 1 second, lean into me for a second. I want you to be really, really selfish. What God's word says right here, that you actually get to experience a better life for yourself if you begin to guard your heart. So just care enough about your life now and your life later that you just want a better life, and that you will begin to guard your heart now because of it. Because there is hurt and there is harm. There is danger out there. So we have to protect it. We have to guard it. And he says it starts by keeping his word in it. So have you made the decision to go and get wisdom? He says the starting place is to go get it, that we would go after it, that we would make a decision to say, hey, I want to begin to understand the things of God. That I want to go after wisdom, and I want to keep it close, and I want to embrace it, and I want to learn from it, and I want to instruct me. I don't want to be the fool. I don't want to be the simple. I don't want to be the scoffer. That's not where I want to find myself. So where are you? Maybe for you, the best place for you to start getting wisdom is to simply begin reading the book of Proverbs. And here's the really cool thing. There's 31 Proverbs. There's a proverb for every day of the month. And so you could begin every day reading a chapter of the Bible and a chapter of the book of Proverbs and begin getting wisdom, to get wisdom every day about, I don't know what you'll find out that day, but I promise it won't be wasted. I promise you won't find anything in there that will be completely useless. And maybe that's something you start as a small group with your small group leaders. But again, reading a Proverbs every day so that you can go and get the wisdom that's available to you. Pray with me.